Good evening and welcome. Tonight, I am Amarachi Ubani. President Buhari offers assurance that Nigeria's economy will come out of recession in 2017. Federal government denies plans to increase 5% value-added tax on goods and services in the coming year. INEC chairman blames election violence on lack of enforcement of relevant electoral laws, says it portends danger for Nigeria's democracy. And gunman shoots and kills Russia's ambassador to Turkey at an art gallery in the capital, Ankara.
And in business news tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria plans to provide forex to fuel marketers and airlines in special currency auction.
On sports news tonight, Kenya Table Tennis Association KTTA invites Nigerian star Segun Toriola to train its players in Nairobi.
I'm Linda Kibe, and from Abuja, female suicide bomber kills herself and an accomplice in a failed attack in Maiduguri, the Borno state capital.
We begin tonight with President Muhammadu Buhari's optimism that the country will soon come out of its current economic recession. The president expressed this optimism at a forum for career ambassadors designate who were recently cleared by the Senate. The president, who said the prevailing economic circumstances have led to restructuring of Nigerian missions abroad, reminded the ambassadors designate that great sacrifices are being made at home and that he expects them to similarly make judicious use of the resources put at their disposal. President Buhari specifically encouraged the ambassadors designate to change the narrative of Nigeria outside the country by playing up positive values and outstanding contributions of Nigerians in the global arena.
As you are aware, our priorities evolve around the economy, security, anti-corruption, good governance, agricultural transformation, and infrastructural development, including rail, roads, and power. In pursuit of these priorities, your task as principal representatives is to build meaningful partnerships to attract foreign investments, new skills, and technologies. You are, unfortunately, proceeding on your duty to us when our country is in a recession. Clearly, this recession has been coming for some time and was finally brought to a head by the collapse in the price of crude oil, the reduction in our oil output, the consequent fall in the value of the naira, all coming as we took office. However, we are working hard to turn around our national economy by effectively reforming our macroeconomic environment through measures, some of which are outlined in my budget speech to the National Assembly last week.
President Muhammadu Buhari, the federal government says it has no plans of increasing the value-added tax, which currently stands at 5% next year. It, however, says 11% of its projected revenue will come from recoveries of looted and misappropriated funds, currently put at 258 billion naira. The Minister of Budgets and National Planning, Senator Udoma, who was speaking at a budget breakdown session in Abuja, says the proposed revenues will help fund the 2017 budget.
All of us Nigerians.
Top government officials, members of civil society groups, and Nigerians from all walks of life gathered for the 2017 budget breakdown, few days after it was presented to the National Assembly by President Muhammadu Buhari. First, the Minister of Budget and National Planning gives a highlight of how far the federal government has gone in the implementation of the 2016 budget, even in the face of dwindling revenue from oil export. He says only 75% of the projected revenue was attained.
With the contraction of the economy and the issues we had with the exchange rate, we ended up with a much higher inflation than we anticipated. As you can see, the exchange rate that we started off with was 197. By the third quarter, it had gone to 305. Consequently, the revenue has been challenged. We are currently only at 75% of our projected revenues.
And after that, the minister explains that the deficit for the 7 trillion naira budget will be funded through foreign and domestic borrowings of 1.6 trillion naira and 1.2 trillion naira respectively. Also, a projected 11% of revenues from looted funds is expected.
We intend to broaden the tax base. We do not intend to increase VAT in 2017. However, we want to make sure that everybody who is due to pay tax pays.
The 2017 budget has a 56% allocation for infrastructure, 20% for governance and security, and 12% for economic reforms, amongst others. All of these, according to the government, is aimed at improving the nation's socio-economic development.
Let's take this discussion further now. Joining us is economist and financial expert and lecturer at the Nasarawa State University, Dr. Uche Owaleke. He joins us from our studios in Abuja. Dr. Owaleke, thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Amarachi.
This is set to be a budget of recovery. It's a budget of recovery and growth. In your view, as a financial expert, how are budget funds allocated with a view to preventing leakages and wastages?
Yeah, let us even begin by asking whether the assumptions are realistic, the baseline assumptions. So in my view, I think the oil price benchmark of $42.5 per barrel is realistic, given the fact on the average for this year it's been $42 per barrel. And we also realize that OPEC countries have had a number of agreements, including the fact that we have had forecasts by reliable international organizations, such as the U.S. Energy Information Administration, that put the average price of oil for 2017 at $52 per barrel. So I think that is realistic. On the issue of exchange rate, of course, yes, 305 naira to the dollar is more realistic than what was there originally. In the MTEF of 2017 to 2019, 290 naira was used. But it's good the federal government realized that it was unrealistic and has increased it to 305 naira to the dollar. The same applies to the oil output of 2.2 million barrels per day. There's also the inflation rate figure, assumption of 15.7%, as opposed to what was there again in the MTEF, which was 12.9%. We also have a GDP, real GDP growth rate assumption of 2.5%, again, as opposed to what was there before, which was 3.3%. So I would say, in a nutshell, it is something that is realistic overall. Let us also put into consideration that the deficit, which is 2.18% of GDP, is within the cap provided by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. And what interests me there is that the borrowing this time will be more of foreign loans. About 46% of the loans will be procured from external sources, unlike what we had previously, where the chunk has been domestic, which is why the burden has been much. Although, even in the 2017 budget proposal, we still spend as high as 33% of government revenue, servicing debt. But what is important is if the ones we are going to get from these concessional windows, the World Bank and African Development Bank, if they are project tied. If they are project tied, I'm sure they should be able to, be self-liquidating, such that the debt burden will, diminish over time.
I'm glad, Doctor, that you've laid the groundwork for us, because that leads me to my next question, which is if you consider the 2017 budget as a balanced one in terms of revenue versus expenditure, and in terms of revenue versus expenditure versus deficits and borrowing plans.
Yes, I was going to say that if you also look at the allocation itself, just as you mentioned, infrastructure is taking 56%. The largest chunk is going to power, works, and housing, then followed by transport. But again, if you look at the recurrent aspect, the recurrent expenditure in 2017 budget is 2.96 trillion. An increase over what we had last year, and it's still disturbing that the 4 MDAs, take up as much as 70% of this recurrent spending, largely personnel costs of ministries of interior, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Defense, take up this large chunk of recurrent expenditure. Overheads there have been put at over 200 billion. We need to also get the details of what make up this overheads. Now, on the capital side, yes, I have talked about power, works, and housing, taking the largest chunk of over 500 billion, and then transport. But you also find that there are key sectors there that, in my view, have not been allocated something substantial. One of them is education. Education has just been allocated 50 billion naira, which, in my view, considering the infrastructure deficits in especially tertiary institutions, I don't think that amount is substantial. But there are also initiatives in the 2017 budget which are commendable. Now, talking about the recapitalization of the Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry, but the only snag there is that the amount being voted for that, again, may not be substantial. 15 billion to recapitalize Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry. Bank of Agriculture, for example, has been operating with a 50 billion naira capital base.
Dr.
Bank of Industry, 250 billion naira capital base. And given their developmental roles in the economy, you would agree with me that these two developmental banks are undercapitalized.
Doctor,
yes, agreed.
Thank you.
The government is also talking about the Development Bank of Nigeria, which is intended to be recapitalized to the tune of 1.3 trillion.
Dr. Uche Owaleke, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the News at 10. Appreciate your thoughts as you shared them with us this evening. To get another perspective on the Nigerian budget for 2017, Channels Television, in conjunction with the Chevening alumni in Nigeria, will tomorrow hold a roundtable on the budget at 10 a.m. The roundtable, planned as a special edition of our regular business program, Business Morning, will feature 5 panelists drawn from the Chevening alumni. The panelists are Mrs. Amina Oyagbolam, her HR executive at MTN Nigeria, Mr. Wole Obayomi, a partner at KPMG, and Mr. Shuaibu Idris, a management consultant. Others are Dr. Abiodun Adeni of Baza University and Professor Kenneth Amechi, Director of Sustainable Business Initiative. Some of those expected to form the studio audience for the roundtable include Mr. Bismarck Rawani, the Chief Executive of Financial Derivatives Limited, Mr. Kiari Bukar, Chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and Mr. Femi Awoyemi, Chief Executive of ProShare Nigeria. The roundtable seeks to offer a roadmap for the implementation of the budget, especially as the country seeks to wriggle its way out of its current meltdown. Again, Channel's Chevening Budget Roundtable will be live on Thursday at 10 a.m. In part two, after the break, Acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onogan, makes case for decongesting courts, proposes that appeals to Supreme and Appeal courts should no longer be automatic. Just stay with us.